That demonstration didn't go as planned. Normally after driving the vehicle for a certain period of time, it gets up to full operating temperature. I park it, go back out, turn the key, it just turns, doesn't start. The second turn of the key, it actually starts, but it struggles to get to idle, and then the truck runs perfectly. This is a problem with the fuel delivery system in my opinion, and I've suspected this for quite some time. I'm going to show you this and some diagnostic steps. Now, this is an F-150 with a fuel-injected engine, but if you have any other vehicle that's fuel-injected, don't turn this video off. This will apply to you as well. The steps I'm taking will apply to all fuel-injected engines that have a return system. So stay tuned. Don't turn it off. Given that I've heard about this hard starting from a lot of people in the F-150 community with the 5.4, probably the 4.6, it's a notorious problem that I have always suspected was a fuel pressure leak down issue where the fuel injectors are leaking into the cylinders, there's no fuel in the fuel rail, or the engine's flooded. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to test that by tapping into that little green nipple right there with my fuel pressure tester. I bought this fuel pressure gauge kit some time ago because I was having problems with a lean condition that was showing up in my OBD2 diagnostics. Turned out that that was a fuel pressure regulator, and I'll link the video that's associated with that above and below. But in this case, I want to use it to see if I have a leak down issue on my fuel injectors. So all I need is this extension. I'm going to plug it into that green port I just showed you, and we're going to move on to the testing steps. I've got the gauge connected to the fuel rail, and it's sitting at 0. I haven't run the engine in a while, and I also haven't turned the key on, which would activate the fuel pump. I'm going to turn the key on now without starting the engine and see what the fuel pressure is, and I'm going to do a leak down test to see if the pressure holds for an appropriate amount of time. The specs you see here show that the key on, engine off, which is the bottom number, should be between 35 and 45. That's once you turn the key on, but do not start the engine. And engine running should be anywhere from 28 to 50. Key is on, engine is off, and you can see that the fuel pressure is dropping very quickly. So this indicates that there is a problem with the fuel system, either at the fuel injectors or at the check valve at the fuel pump. The engine runs perfectly when it is running, but let's go ahead and check fuel pressures while the engine's running, and then we can make some decisions on where next steps would be. As you can hear, the engine is running, and I'm sitting at about between 29 and 30 PSI, which is within spec, but on the low end of 28 to 50. So it indicates that I'm able to get fuel pressure to the engine, but it's not where I think it should be. So I'm in the vehicle trying to monitor the gauge since I only have 2 hands, and let's see what happens when I do a throttle tip-in. So the fuel pressure does go up, but not significantly. So the engine is pulling vacuum on that fuel pressure regulator and allowing the fuel pressure to increase, but I'm not sure if that's enough. Last thing I want to do is pull the vacuum off of the fuel pressure regulator and see if the fuel pressure jumps up. Got the gauge right here. And that does indicate that the fuel pressure regulator is working properly. It jumped up about 6, 7, I couldn't see accurately, but between 5 and 10 PSI. I just reconnected the vacuum and that little red line, and the pressure is dropping back down to 29, 30. So I'm pretty sure it is not the fuel pressure regulator, especially since it's only a couple years old. I just replaced it. Adding a little more intrigue to this problem, I just turned the engine off after showing you throttle tip in, where I got additional fuel pressure, pulling the vacuum off the fuel pressure regulator, got additional pressure to the fuel rail. I just came over here to disconnect the fuel pressure gauge, and now the leak down test is showing that there's no problem. So I still got the right fuel pressure in the entire fuel system, 29 to 30 PSI, which is what it was when I did the key on, engine off. So I am not sure what the problem is. Something is failing intermittently, And I'm not going to start pulling fuel injectors and replacing fuel pumps with an intermittent issue that I can't firmly diagnose. I'm going to further think about this, see if I can figure out another way to test the system. Okay, so I thought about everything after all my diagnostics. I did some research on the internet, and there are a couple problems here that lead me toward the fuel pump. Number one, key on, engine off, I'm only getting about 29 psi. It shouldn't be anywhere from 35 to 45 psi. But it is leaking down, as I indicated, intermittently. Second, when at the end of the video I showed that it was holding pressure after running the vehicle, it gave me the indication that the fuel injectors are not leaking down. So I don't think I have a fuel injector problem, although they probably could be pulled and cleaned and reinstalled. So the check valve fuel pump combination in the fuel tank is my suspicion that is the problem. And given that the truck has 226,000 miles on it, it's 19 years old, and it's a daily driver, and I actually drive it long distances, I'm going to go ahead and source a Motorcraft pump. I want to make sure I get the best quality pump, replace it, and that should take care of my problem. So that's a future video, stay tuned for, but that is my diagnosis for the problem that I'm observing. If you have any questions, please comment below. Give me that thumbs up, that helps my channel significantly, and if you're not subscribed, please subscribe, that also helps, and I'll see you next time on Driving Intelligence.